Hello everybody and welcome to a spooky edition of the Media Box. Today we'll be looking at a recent stealth horror game that has been making ripples everywhere. Based on a film series that hasn't exactly had a great track record for amazing games, heck, even good games, this is of course Alien Isolation. But the question is, does the game break the mold? Is it worth playing? Well, let's dive in and explore Sevastopol Station to see what we can find.
Ash and Captain Dallas are dead. Cargo and ship destroyed. I should reach the frontier in about 6 weeks. With a little luck, the network will pick me up. This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo, signing off.
The game begins by introducing our main character, Ripley, as she learns that the audio logs from her mother's ship, whom she hasn't seen in 15 years, the Nostromo. Immediately, they set off to recover the logs, kept on Sevastopol Station after a ship dropped them off there. Sevastopol is a huge, sprawling station next to an even larger gas giant planet. The station is broken down into many different sections: science, synthetics, medical, and a few other more interesting projects later into the game, as well as engineering. But we'll get more into those as we get to them. At first, Ripley's goal is to get the Nostromo logs and get off the station, but it quickly becomes a game of survival as they discover the station is in disarray, cut off from the world due to the unknown and hazardous life form that got into the station with the group that dropped off the Nostromo logs in the first place. You have to deal with other people on the station, the Working Joe androids that are searching for trespassers, and the scariest enemy of all, the alien, the xenomorph, which is loose in the station and is traveling through the ducts on the prowl for you and any other people it happens to come across. Since the station is cut off, its power is very hit and miss. Some are completely devoid of power, save important systems, for instance, life support and oxygen. So the station seems very desolate, dangerous, and menacing. You can make your way throughout its hallways, but you can also find refuge in the air ducts and the maintenance shafts of each part of the station. These are typically the safest way to travel, but if you need to hide, maybe a locker or a small drawer would suit you better, maybe even under a desk. But be careful. Make too much noise, and you'll end up like every other sucker to mess with the alien on the station. Ciao. Half the appeal of this game is how well the environment of the station and how well it's constructed around the idea of the game. Sevastopol is very well designed and happens to be a very believable station in full functionality, but in its decrepit state now makes it the perfect stage and atmosphere for the story unfolding within it. The game feels great in terms of atmosphere, at least for a while anyway. In the beginning of the game and the midpoint of the game, it's very, very unnerving. You're constantly in danger of being attacked by something that's extremely hard to track. Try as you might, but you can never be too sure where it is, so you spend a lot of time just trying to avoid conflict to avoid the other people or the synthetic working Joes on the ship. If you encounter them, they'll probably make enough noise to get you both a one-way ticket to Xenomorph Town. Each part of the station feels different and has its own pieces and parts that make it unique. The Psi-Med part of the station is by far the most interesting in terms of atmosphere. It's very dark, gloomy, corpses strewn everywhere, and the air of this medical department is really quite unnerving. It also contains one of the weirdest objectives you have early on, involving getting a doctor who, according to some records, may or may not have a drug problem, and you have to get him some, well, you guessed it, drugs, while also trying to find medical supplies for one of your companions who came across with you. However, there are some weaker areas within the game. For instance, some of the areas you return to later in the game, or the newer ones in the conclusion, are barely anything beyond a couple of rooms and long, dark hallways. These latter areas are really lacking in terms of a strong atmosphere, and I was really spending my time trying to get away as quickly as possible. Most of these rooms are just completely dark, and not much is really going on. Overall, the game can deliver really well on atmosphere, and the fear that the game can create is very good, and it doesn't skimp out at any point. As I said, as the game goes on and you get farther and farther, the areas progressively get a little bit more boring, as if they were running out of ideas. One thing that the games don't do well, that I feel does a very good job as giving a different feeling to it, is the spacesuit parts of the game. You get to go outside and look at the station from the outside while you move to perform your next objective. The biggest problem with these parts of the game is sometimes they drag on far, far too long, or the reasons you're out there are really just kind of boring. It serves as a way to break up the action, keep things going a little longer, slow it down, and give you some eye candy. Speaking of eye candy, this game looks magnificent. This game is a great example of what next gen can really do and what it should look like, and it's a shame not as many games are getting to the same level of appearance as this game. I hope as we get along throughout the years, we can get more games that look as nice as this and are just as polished. The soundtrack of the game is very dynamic based on what is going on around you. The tracks get louder and more bombastic as the alien gets closer to you or when you can physically see it. It also becomes a little bit more faster and tense as you see other humans or synthetics. It's a really solid soundtrack, and it serves its purpose of keeping the tensions high. However, one problem I had personally is that if you keep the music settings at the default, you'll find a lot of times that the music will completely drown out the rest of the game, making it very difficult to differentiate the sounds from the music and what the things around you are making. This becomes a really big problem because finding out where you need to go or where things are around you is on what you can hear. If you can't hear anything, then you'll always get caught, everything will always get a drop on you, and you'll never be prepared for anything the game will throw at you. And while we're on that, everything around you tends to make some kind of noise. People and the alien tend to make a lot of noise while moving around. Humans usually are kicking things around or just taking loud footsteps, while the alien is constantly running through ventilation shafts above you or below you, making loud, thumping noises as it moves. However, the synthetic working Joes are very quiet as they move around. They're going in predetermined, straight paths. Also, while you're moving around on your own, if you're not careful, you can make a lot of noise by kicking things that are all around the floor. The guns, like the revolver and the shotgun, all make very good, realistic sounds. The Molotov cocktail and the flamethrower both sound really well when they're being used. The flames sound like they're just about to jump out of the game at you. Overall, it does its job very well, and I was impressed with what was coming out of the game. Now, here is where the game does very well, but also at the same time, it kind of drops the ball. In the beginning of the game, it is magnificent. I cannot stress that enough. You have very little in terms of supplies, and you have to be very careful using your revolver ammo or any sort of bomb you craft. They all use a lot of supplies and generate a ton of noise that serves only to draw more unwanted attention to yourself. Also in the beginning, with the looming danger of the alien, it's absolutely horrifying to make practically any noise, because you'd know you'd see the xenomorph soon, because he'd come to investigate any minute sounds you made, and he was not friendly. In the beginning of the game, I was really tense and worried about the impending danger of angering something I couldn't harm. It was a really neat system that gave the game an edge. I was always on the edge of my seat. It gave me a fear that most games just don't really have. The problem, however, is there are periods in the game where there is no danger of an alien. This means that there is no longer any danger to using your weapons, and in fact, they give you a shotgun to use after you get rid of the alien in around the midpoint of the game. This gives you a free pass to just blow people and synthetics apart to your heart's content. Speaking of, the story after you get rid of the alien is an absolute snooze fest. The synthetics all turn evil because the evil corporation is protecting a hidden xenomorph nest in the bottom of the station. Honestly, it could have been a lot more interesting, and the combat and the environments, they're just no longer as engaging when you can just go around blowing the heads off of anything that gets in your way. Human pulls his gun to you and tells you to stop, pull yours out and just blow his head off. The game doesn't function well in this kind of situation, and when the fear is removed, the combat shows its head as mediocre and really clunky, which can be good when the entire section isn't about fighting, but in this situation it is. That is, however, until the aliens come back, when you realize that there's a huge nest within the station. This is what prevents Ripley from escaping, as it is overriding all directives to the AI core following a single objective, which is to protect this nest. Due to this development, you must venture into the nest and overload the engine to destroy the nest and the aliens within. Honestly, this area had the potential and was supposed to be high tension and put you on edge, but at this point in the game, I was just bored. It introduces facehuggers, but all it takes is a quick hit of a flamethrower and they're gone. It's over for them. It wasn't interesting, and more than anything, it was just frustrating, as there are multiple xenomorphs and the aforementioned facehuggers, and you have very little places to hide and very limited flamethrower ammo. I think within the entire nest area, I only had about 3 to 4 places to hide that I could personally find. In fact, that's a big problem with the later third of the game. There's very little in terms of places to hide. The game kind of forces you into conflicts as the game goes on, which honestly I thought was really annoying. I like to stay in the shadows and going slow and using my ammo very sparingly, capping out my revolver ammo for quite a while throughout the game. It starts out so well, but I'm not exactly sure what happened along the way. It kind of dropped its gloomy and spooky atmosphere for a while, and when it tries to pick it back up and put it back on, it just doesn't fit as well as it used to. So, as I mentioned, the station is holding a spooky xenomorph nest deep within the engineering part of the station, for the means of sale for Weyland-Yutani. It's never exactly explained what the purpose of the sale is, but they want the xenomorphs for some reason or another. So, you destroy the nest by first overloading it in the nest, then going up into the engineering center and forcing a full overload of all of the engines at once, completely frying the actual nest. However, this doesn't kill any of the xenomorphs that are fully grown, meaning you're now dealing with 2 to 3 xenomorphs at one time, and if you're not careful, it's pretty annoying. After the destruction of the nest, your goal is to attach the ship you came in on onto the space station that is literally falling apart and escape. This isn't a terribly hard feat. It involves pulling a lot of switches, avoiding a few guards that are trying to get off the station themselves, and find you. There's nothing too difficult about any of this besides the sheer amount of humans coming out of practically everywhere. And I mean, they're everywhere. I find that sicking the alien on them made it a bit easier, but then you had to wait to evade the alien, and sometimes there were still people left, and on top of that, it just dragged on. But you get the ship attached, and just as you go to get to your suit, well, I think I'll leave the very last bit of the story to you. The very ending, it must be seen to believe. Let's just say, I'm not a fan. So, overall, I enjoyed Alien Isolation for about the 70-75% of the game. Everything after you take care of the first alien just kind of feels tacked on, and the game could have ended a few hours earlier and nothing of real merit would have been lost. What the game had in the beginning was so much better than what it had towards the end. It just kind of dropped the ball, and it was never really able to pick itself back up. Overall, I give Alien Isolation a 7.5 out of 10.